Chapter 5 is about the internet, and it has two different parts to it. One is about the internet itself and how it works and how it's a little bit different than when we talk about the web. And then the second half of chapter 5 talks about some things to consider if you're going to be using the internet on a mobile device. So a lot of what we talk about in the second half of chapter 5 is kind of similar to what we talked about in chapter 4 in choosing a computer. So let's talk about the internet first. We're going to go through a couple of reasons why the internet was created and some of the different things that you can access through the internet. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the web, which is the information that's housed on the internet. So the internet was created a while ago. It actually was a Department of Defense creation. The military used it or created it so that they would be able to communicate within their organization. And it's basically a communication system. So the internet is a whole bunch of different computers that are linked together via thousands and thousands of both wired and wireless connections. Some of the other terminology related to the history of the internet. ARPANET was the ancestor of the internet as we know it today. That's the Department of Defense system that was created a long time ago. The NSFNet was a higher capacity network that was created a little bit later for the National Science Foundation. And then the word backbone is essentially all of the different structures. It's the infrastructure that allows the internet to operate. Some of the services that you can use are essentially the web. We call it the web. And sometimes web and internet is used interchangeably, but the web is basically the content. It's the websites that you go to when you have things to look up or questions to answer. And it's essentially open to anyone. The internet is not owned by a specific person. There are websites and servers where data gets housed. And if it's free, if it's public, then anybody can access that information. So these are some of the services that you can use because of the internet. The World Wide Web, of course, is the biggest one, and people often interchange the World Wide Web with internet. The internet is the physical connections, and the web is the content. The web is what your information that you're looking up. Email or electronic mail is another service that's possible because of the internet. Chat and instant messaging, so when you use Skype or you go online and use Google Hangout, all of those services are operated through the internet. File transfer protocol allows you to send files or data through the internet from one computer to the next. In our computer lab, we use a technology called peer-to-peer. So we have a server that houses all of our computer software and our data, and then all of our computers connect to that server via the network. And so our individual lab computers don't have all of this data housed on them. And then another more popular service, or a service that's becoming more popular, is called Voice over Internet Protocol. It's essentially a telephone that operates through the internet. So rather than having to connect via telephone lines, your computer connects to the internet and the signals or the voice and data gets transmitted over those types of cables. Voice over Internet Protocol is what allows telephones to be a lot cheaper because you can connect anywhere. You don't have to pay for long distance and all of that stuff. The World Wide Web is a collection of information, and it was created in 1989. It has evolved throughout the last several years to the point where it's a lot of it is generated by people that use it. So you go onto Facebook and you create Facebook posts. You're adding to the collection of information that's available. It's called Web 2.0 because it's sort of the evolution of what was originally there from large organizations. The next phase, Web 3.0, is what's expected to happen as more and more people begin to add to the collection of data that's online. Email is the service that most people use when they need to send messages. It's become more popular than traditional, what people sometimes call snail mail. It allows you to exchange information from one computer to another using your email account, and there's a lot of different service providers that you can use. Yahoo, Gmail, Microsoft, a whole bunch of different places you can create an email account, and you can send both messages and data as files that are attached. Other services are more instant, like chat and instant messaging. IRC was an early method of chat. It was like AOL Messenger. If you've ever seen that movie, You've Got Mail, that's an example of what an IRC looked like. And now they have chats for pretty much all your email clients, and Facebook even has an option for chatting in real time. So a little message box pops up and you can kind of talk back and forth. IM was a form of chat. AOL was basically the first, I guess, company to use instant messaging. And it's different than a traditional chat in that you're restricted. So you have to be signed in and using a specific service to be able to do instant messaging. FTP, I learned about this a long time ago when I took my first Business 101 course. And it was something we had to learn because we couldn't send large files. At that time, the internet was a lot slower. And so in order to send our homework to our teacher, we had to use this process called FTP. And file transfer protocol is basically a way for sending files from one computer to the next. Now we can do that using Dropbox or Google Drive. You can even send files as attachments through email. But essentially what you do is you put your files into a folder somewhere, and Dropbox is an example, and then you give the person who you're sharing the file with either a link or a password or some kind of access. They can go onto Dropbox then and look for that file that you uploaded, and then they can download it themselves. Peer-to-peer is a type of network. Basically, it allows computers within a network to transfer information. Our computer lab is set up as a peer-to-peer network. We're connected to a server, and the software allows our computers to access the data that's on the server. If you connect your computer to someone else's computer, you can do a peer-to-peer file share. It's sort of the same thing that happens when you plug your computer and your phone, or your phone into your computer, and it starts to recognize that you have files on your phone that can then get transferred to your computer. And then the last service that we talked about is Voice over Internet Protocol. It's essentially an online phone service. It makes phone service a lot cheaper because you're using the internet connection to transmit that data. It allows you to have a phone connection to people in other countries without having to pay long distance fees. And the internet phone is the technology is what's used for oceanic cables. So if you have oceanic phone service, that's what you're using. The quality depends on the network connection though. So if your network goes down, then unfortunately your phone goes down as well. Using the internet at home, you need to have a few things in order to be able to access the internet. A web browser is the software that you use as the interface between you and the internet. So examples would be Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Microsoft's Internet Explorer. And most of the ones you choose are based upon your preference. I like Google Chrome. Sometimes it depends on what kind of other software you're using. Not all websites are compatible with all of the browsers. Some other things that people might be interested in: being able to play games, access TV and radio on the internet, and then social media software has grown a lot over the last few years. The web browser is the interface. It's what you see on your screen when you're connected to the internet. When you choose a browser, like you click on Google Chrome, you choose a home page, and that's essentially a web page. And web pages are basically compilations of a variety of links. So your web page has links to other documents that have information. And when you do something like a search, it brings up links to all of the different documents that have the information you're looking for. So the internet is using a language called hypertext. So when you see HTML, that's essentially a file that's instructions for your browser. Hypertext links are essentially all of those different connections that take you to information on other pages. A URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator, and that's the address of where the documents and information get housed on this huge network of information. HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's basically a computer language computer rules for how data gets formatted so that it can go back and forth between the server. Most websites that use HTTP, and you'll notice it says HTTP at the beginning of all the addresses when you look in that address box when you're in your browser. HTTP itself is not secure, so the data that's going back and forth between your computer and the server is accessible by others. If you're using a site where you're like buying something or you're having to input your personal information, you'll see a lot of times it changed to HTTPS, which is a secure connection between your computer and the server where the information is going. So it encrypts the data. And a lot of times there is a certificate that authenticates the authority that makes sure your data doesn't get compromised as you're sending it to whoever you're connected to. Search engines are kind of like dictionaries. They house all of the different links to the pages that have information you're looking for. So the search engine is a combination of hardware and software, and at that company's or organization's site, they have a server that houses software that allows the server to search through the web. So Google, for example, is a service that scans the web for different information. So when you go to Google and you type in a search, Google is going to scan all of its closets, so to speak, and look for the information that matches what you're looking for. You can also play games online, and that's a very popular way for people to use the internet. More and more, the internet has become a popular venue for watching TV and listening to the radio. Netflix has sort of changed how people watch TV, and I've even heard some entertainment radio people talking about how Netflix is changing the big networks. So like there's a lot of content being made now specifically for services like Netflix. So the movie or the series Orange is the New Black, that was a series made specifically for Netflix. It wasn't created for any of the big TV networks. So in order to be able to watch it, you had to connect to the internet and go to the Netflix website. And more stations are even being proactive in making their content available online. So if you subscribe to HBO, for example, you can log into HBO's website and watch the shows online using your login from your HBO. So that's become a lot more popular because of the internet. Social media and social networking is another thing. I think most people don't realize what things were like before Facebook. But social networking has made it a lot easier to connect with people. It's changed how people communicate. It's changed how businesses communicate with people. And it gives you a way to connect to people that maybe you would never have connected with. Twitter is a way for people to communicate quickly. And it's even being used in a lot of educational settings now to allow teachers to incorporate technology into their classrooms. At school, most schools now have at least one device per student. Some have more. And education has sort of become dependent in a lot of ways on technology. Students use technology both as a learning device and as a device to look for information. I think pretty much computers have taken over the place of libraries. And computers have made it, and the internet have made it possible for students in college to take classes and get degrees without ever having to go physically to a school building. So that's the internet and why it's become so important. And now we're going to talk about some things to consider when you want to be able to use the internet mobilely, not having to connect from a connected desktop. So we're going to look at some of the software that you might need and to talk about some of the differences between the office and mobile computer models, and think about how the mobile devices have some things you have to think about to protect yourself. So software is what's necessary for your mobile devices to run. So we already talked about operating systems. Most mobile devices use what are called apps. We don't call them applications. I guess we're using small devices, we use small words, but apps are the different types of software that you can use to do things with your mobile device. So Apple has its own app store. You can download software to your Apple devices, and then there's the Google Play Store for Android and other devices. and they just allow you to do things. You can find apps for lots of different purposes. Notebooks and tablets do require you to use a battery, especially if you want to be mobile and you don't want to have to plug into the wall. So that's something to think about. If you're going to be using your computer or your tablet away from a power supply, you might want to make sure that you pay attention to how much battery life you have, because you can still lose work on a tablet just like you can if your computer all of a sudden turns off. So you can pay attention to your battery. Some other things to consider when you're using your cell phone is the ringtone. So you can choose to be alerted for different purposes, and that's preference. Wallpaper is the screen that you choose to have in your background. Again, you can make a lot of just personal preference choices about those things. When you use a lot of online services and when you surf the web a lot of companies or malicious people have things online that are called malware. Malware is malicious software that basically can mess with your computer or your phone. So it's a good idea to get anti-malware software to clean up your phone or your computer every so often. And if you're using a phone and a computer or a tablet, then you might want to consider using a like Google, or if you have Apple devices, then signing up for the Apple ID, because what happens is it allows you to synchronize all of the information on all your devices. So like if you have a calendar in Google and you have Google on your phone and Google on your computer, using the same account will ensure that your calendars are always in sync. And you can, if you're using the internet, it's a good idea to have some kind of software and tells you when you're in range of the Wi-Fi. The picture in this phone is of a QR code. A QR code basically is a way of housing information. So if you look on the sides of certain products, they might have QR codes. You can use your phone's camera to capture the code or take a picture of it, kind of like a scanner, and it will then decode the information and take you to normally a website that has more information about that product. A lot of programs that you can use on both a tablet, a phone, and a computer are or a lot of programs can be used across multiple types of devices. For example, you can use Google Chrome. I have Google Chrome on my phone because that's the browser I like to use. So you can download apps so that your experience on your mobile device is very similar to the experience that you have when you're using your computer. Choosing software is dependent upon what you're going to use the device for. Depending on where you're searching, you can search by keyword. If you know what the app is called, you can search for it by name. If you don't know what kind of apps you might want, if you just bought a phone or you just got a tablet and you're trying to figure out what kinds of software to put on it, it's good to be able to ask people. So, you know, sometimes the salesperson might give you suggestions of what kinds of apps that you might want to download. If you go to the App Store, you can also use the, they have categories of apps, like if they're the most downloaded or most popular. That might give you some ideas about what kinds of apps to download. To be able to do business mobily, it's kind of important to consider what kinds of devices you might need and what kinds of software are going to help you make your business more efficient. Some examples of things, like if you're going to be doing most of your business out on the road, you can buy things that connect to both your cell phone and a tablet to be able to accept credit card payments, for example. There's a few different options. There's Square is one. You plug in a little reader to your phone and you can read credit cards. You can sign up for online services where they will process your payments from your customers, so you don't have to worry about billing or taking cash. There are different tools to improve productivity, so like scheduling apps and organizational tools that you can use for your business. If you're going to be doing a lot of work on the road, you also want to consider things like having extra batteries and maybe even a hotspot so that you can connect to the internet if you're not in range of another Wi-Fi. And then something to also take into consideration is how flexible that these mobile devices allow you to be. And really using that flexibility, the ability to work from anywhere is a huge advantage. of both the internet and a mobile device. And so sometimes we get limited because we think that people have to meet all together in the same room. And while that's nice, these devices give you the flexibility of saying, okay, we really need to have a meeting and somebody can't be there. We can still have the meeting. That person can video chat with us, or we can use a Google Doc and collaborate that way. And so these devices have become really powerful tools for collaboration. And sometimes there's even the option for people to work from home. So telecommuting, I know there was a big movement at one time for telecommuting because it saves costs. I mean, you don't have to have a huge office building where everybody comes to work and you pay for electricity and rent. People can work from their homes and they are responsible for those costs. You just have to make sure they have a reliable connection and that they have a schedule where they're meeting with each other regularly and they have all the tools at their homes that they need to do their job. So that's a huge advantage of being able to connect from anywhere to anyone. Other things to think about is if you're considering being more mobile, like offering the option of telecommuting, or you think that might be something you're interested in, and even if you're still going to school, if you're considering doing like online classes, besides the actual technological things, you want to consider your own personal preferences. Like if you are managing an office and you are giving people the option to telecommute, you have to be comfortable with that management style. You have to be okay with not seeing your employees every day. You also have to have a way to measure whether or not people are doing what they say they're doing from home. So it gives your employees a lot of flexibility, which also requires to have a little bit more structure and expectations so that everybody is still doing their job. They're just doing it in a little bit of a different way. I just talked about why telecommuting might be an option. It's a way to save costs. Having a virtual office means you don't have to have a building where people can come to every day. So you don't have to worry about overhead costs like rent and expenses like utilities. So if you're a small business just starting up, it's a huge advantage to not have to pay for those overhead costs. And I know a lot of small businesses where their employees just meet at Starbucks when they need to, and they do everything else from their own homes. The other consideration, if you're doing a lot of this via the internet, is the idea of the security of your data. So if you're sending and transmitting information online, there's always the risk that your data can be compromised. And so some companies need to consider whether they're going to have a secure website where only employees, they call those intranets, only employees are able to access the intranet. Because all of the creation, all the work you do is your property, and you need to make sure that it's secure. Other specific tips, when you're using these kinds of devices and you're doing a non-traditional organization where people might not be meeting together at the same time, it's more important to set goals. So specific tasks that need to be completed, not necessarily a specific amount of time. So your workday might not be from 8 to 3. Your workday might be finish these 5 tasks and then your workday is done. For some people that's great because they naturally work faster. They can get a lot more done. And for businesses, that's good because they, again, are saving some money in terms of overhead costs. Some of those goals need to be short-term and some need to be long-term. Definitely, if you're doing telecommuting, you have to have daily expectations so that people are using their time wisely. And for the most part, people who telecommute end up doing a lot more. So it's not always the person who's working from home may not always be feeling like it's a great advantage. And you also need to set up some parameters for when workers are available, because theoretically, if you set up a set of goals for today and that gets put out the night before, if I choose to stay up all night and complete my work, that means that tomorrow I can sleep all day. As long as you're comfortable with that, that's fine. But if you know that you want your workers to be available for a video chat at 9 o'clock in the morning, you want to make sure that everyone knows that. And then give some guidelines about how you expect supervisors to monitor. And then as the worker, if this is you, so if you are, this applies not only if you're going to be a person who works from home, but also if you're a student who's going to be taking a lot of online classes. you have to determine what's the best place for you to do that. I know for me, working from home is really difficult because I have a lot of things going on at home and I get distracted by those things. So I prefer to work outside of my home, and I sometimes go to a library or a Starbucks so that I can concentrate. As the person working from home or doing your schoolwork from home, you have to take the lead on communicating with others. It's not going to happen naturally because you're not all together. You're not in the room with your teacher. So if you have a question, you have to take the initiative to put that question out there and ask someone. It also takes a lot more focus because you don't have that structured environment where class starts at 9 and ends at 10:15. You might get started on your work at 8 o'clock and there's all these distractions that take place, and then you don't finish till 11. So you have to know what tasks are appropriate at given times, set some goals for yourself so you know, okay, I'm going to spend 2 hours on my work. I'm going to start at 9 and I'm only going to do this assignment and until I'm done. So you have a schedule and you can prioritize your work so that you can be efficient, because a lot of times without the structures of an office or a classroom, people tend to end up taking a lot longer to do things because they get involved in doing multiple tasks at the same time. Therefore, they end up taking longer, and that's why some people can become really quickly dissatisfied with working from home. And then finally, thinking about how to be safe while you do all these things. So one of the risks with mobile computing is that people tend to forget that when you're driving, you shouldn't be using your devices. In Hawaii and in most other states, there are now laws that prohibit you from using your mobile devices while you're driving for safety purposes. The other risk with mobile devices is that they're small and they're easy to take. So if you leave your devices sitting out, there's a possibility someone will take it. And when you are working from home or you're doing all of your schoolwork from your laptop, that can be a big deal when those things go missing. You also have to be careful to consider how you connect to the internet in a secure way and how to protect your privacy so you're not sending vulnerable information over unsecure networks. And you want to make sure you have some software installed so that you can periodically scan and remove any malicious software from your computer. If you're going to be using Wi-Fi in public spaces like at Starbucks, then you want to consider what you do in those kinds of spaces, because that information may not be safe. It's not encrypted. So if you're using your laptop at a public space and you want to buy something over the internet, you might want to consider how you do that. So you're not having to transmit secure like credit card information over the internet. That's not secure. In some cases, an organization can set up what's called a virtual private network, and that requires you to usually log into the internet using a password, and then your connection in that space is protected. You can subscribe to a personal VPN for a fee. So like if you wanted to be able to connect, say to, I know for example, Oceanic Cable, if you're an Oceanic subscriber and you have Roadrunner Internet, they have a virtual private network. It's called the Time Warner Cable Passpoint, and that requires you to log in. It's a secure network. It's not available everywhere, but you can log in, and that information that you send via that network is a little more secure than the open cable Wi-Fi networks that they offer. And then you have to think about your social interactions with people. Because of the internet, communication has changed a lot, and there are still rules though about how to be polite and courteous. And when you're sending emails, when you're chatting online, when you're posting messages on Facebook, there's a lot of things to consider because it's a lot different than face-to-face communication where you can see people and you can interpret their nonverbal behaviors. Because a lot of things are mobile, you can multitask really fast and easy, and that sometimes means that you're kind of insensitive to people. So if you're on the phone, for example, you might not want to be trying to talk on the phone and order your coffee at the same time. You want to focus on one thing at a time so that the two people that you're trying to communicate with don't feel like they're being ignored. If you have conversations, like if you're sending an email and it's a a sensitive topic, make sure you keep those conversations private. Don't do a reply to all, and don't blast things out on Facebook that you don't want other people to be aware of. If you're in a public space, it's a good idea to turn the sound off on your device, put it on vibrate, or put on earphones if you're going to be listening to something. It's always a good idea when sending messages to still use greetings and goodbye. So don't just type in an email. And some people, this is an argument, but I always treat an email as if I was writing a letter, because the person's reading it just like they would be reading a letter that they get in the mail. So start with a greeting and end with a sincerely or a thank you, so that it still sounds like a professional conversation. And then always write when you're calm, because the message doesn't allow for the person that you're talking to see you. So words can get misinterpreted really easily depending on how you write them. And a lot of times if you write emails when you're in a bad mood or you're upset, they really, really come out sounding mad. And it's hard to change those words once you click send. Okay? And that is chapter 5.